Good evening. You're watching World News Tonight on TVP World. I'm Aaron Darman. Donald Trump should never meet with Vladimir Putin in Europe, or he risks disrespecting the continent. This from one of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy's closest aides, speaking exclusively to TVP World. Ihor Brusylo also adding tonight that he does not see an immediate end in sight to the war in his country. More in just a moment. First, the latest headlines. Poland will reopen parts of the Belarusian border in a test for the Minsk regime. American sanctions force Russian oil giant Lukoil to sell its international assets. And the return of Andrej Babiš as Czech Prime Minister inches closer. Russia has been using drones to hunt Ukrainian civilians living near the front line. That's according to a United Nations inquiry, which says the act amounts to a crime against humanity. It comes as the fight for eastern Ukraine ramps up, with a key advisor to Volodymyr Zelenskyy telling TVP World there appears to be little light at the end of the tunnel. Diana Skyer has more.
The battle for eastern Ukraine intensifies. The frontline city of Pokrovsk, once a key logistics hub for Ukrainian forces, is now at the center of some of the fiercest fighting in months. Ukrainian officials report more than 150 combat clashes in just 24 hours, with nearly half of them in the Pokrovsk sector. Ukraine's military says around 200 Russian troops have infiltrated the city in small groups, seeking to cut off key supply routes that keep the Eastern Front alive. For those still trapped inside, every day is a fight for survival. And as the front lines burn, a new UN Rights Commission report concluded that Russia's repeated drone strikes on civilians in southern and eastern Ukraine amount to war crimes and crimes against humanity. But while the bombs fall, diplomacy takes center stage in Brussels. European leaders have reaffirmed support for Ukraine, but postponed a key decision on how to use frozen Russian assets to fund the war-torn country's reconstruction.
I think it is an important step forward that we look at the immobilized Russian assets.
The European Commission is now expected to propose concrete mechanisms later this year. Meanwhile, in his latest nightly address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said that Kyiv is stepping up partnerships with defense manufacturers to boost production of long-range weapons.
We offer 3-year contracts to the most effective manufacturers. We are focusing on this approach, long contracts, so that there is more confidence for both manufacturers and our army. I will also be checking the pace of contract execution. This must be implemented.
In Moscow, the tone remains defiant. Russia insists that any resolution to the conflict must address what they call the root causes. And in the United States, President Donald Trump urged Vladimir Putin to end the war, criticizing Moscow's latest test of its nuclear-powered Burevestnik missile.
They know we have a nuclear submarine, the greatest in the world, right off their shores. So, it doesn't have to go 8,000 miles.
From the streets of Pokrovsk to the hallways of Brussels and Washington, the war over Ukraine's future continues on every front. And in an exclusive interview for TVP World, President Zelenskyy's top advisor says there's still no light at the end of the tunnel.
The very near end is not in sight.
And for Kyiv, the coming weeks could determine not just the fate of one city, but the direction of the entire war. For TVP World, I'm Diana Skyer.
And we'll have the full exclusive interview with Ihor Brusylo later in the show. One of Russia's largest oil producers, Lukoil, has revealed its overseas assets will go on the market in the wake of Washington's targeted sanctions on the company. The energy giant, which is headquartered in Moscow and owns 2 refineries across Central and Eastern Europe, says its hand was forced by, quote, restrictive measures by some states. Jakub Kapishevsky explains.
This is the Bulgarian refinery in Burgas, near the coast of the Black Sea. It's owned by Lukoil and is probably going on sale soon. According to a press release posted on the Russian company's website, Lukoil wants to sell its international holdings.
Lukoil informs that owing to introduction of restrictive measures against the company and its subsidiaries by some states, the company announces its intention to sell its international assets. The consideration of bids from potential purchasers has been started.
But it's not going to be easy. As a first step, the Bulgarian government has to put the Burgas refinery in state trusteeship, essentially taking over control but not ownership of the facility. This is how the German government handled Rosneft's facility in Szwed near the Polish border. And now Szwed can still supply the German market because Berlin on Monday secured a one-year exemption from last week's sanctions, which were also slapped on Rosneft.
The German government is in better position because the refinery Szwed, which is owned by Rosneft, is under the control of the government. So basically, Bulgaria is late as always.
Once it's done, a buyer needs to be found, one which all the interested parties will say yes to, the parties being the Bulgarian government, the U.S. government, and Lukoil itself. So who could be the buyer? In the past, Hungarian oil company MOL and its Azeri counterpart Sokar expressed interest in the refinery in Burgas, but they both have the same problem. They do business with Lukoil, which has been slapped with sanctions. This leaves another contender, Kazakh company Kazmunaygas.
But with Kazmunaygas, it's interesting because the main crude oil supplier for Bulgaria right now is Kazakhstan. So there's a logic in this supply chain to be Kazakh investor.
In the end, however, Nikolov thinks Bulgarians will need to find a Western buyer, since Russia still holds too much sway in Central Asia. As such, Kazmunaygas could be a no-go for the Americans. And given how much work is still to be done, it's hard to see this sale going through this year.
A test for the Belarusian regime. That's how Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk is describing plans to reopen two border crossings with Belarus next month. The move comes after a spate of provocations from Minsk, including smuggling illegal migrants across the line of contact and allowing Russian drones to violate Polish airspace. Kazimierz Słyszak reports.
This is one of the most volatile NATO borders, the Polish border with Belarus. It was shortly completely closed by Warsaw in September as a response to the joint Russian-Belarusian military exercises, with only a single crossing opened soon after. But Poland is now prepared to throw the Belarusian regime a bone.
We will be ready to reopen two border crossings with Belarus in November, in Bobrovniki and Kuźnica.
The announcement comes right after Lithuania announced it would close its borders with Belarus in the wake of several balloons flying into the country. Warsaw says it's monitoring the situation and will coordinate with Vilnius.
We are conducting intense consultations with the Lithuanians so that they won't be taken by surprise. We need to have a coordinated policy with our allies in the region.
Lithuania says it will shoot down any other balloons which will cross into its airspace from Belarus. These balloons are usually used by cigarette smugglers, but the government in Vilnius is not excluding deliberate action by the Minsk regime.
They're testing our ability, first of all, technically just to shoot them down and to deal with this problem. And secondly, it's a psychological affair. They want just to question ability of the state to be effective in tackling this problem.
Belarus is also responsible for various provocations aimed at Poland, including sending waves of illegal migrants to storm its borders. The regime of Alexander Lukashenko, Vladimir Putin's close ally, imprisoned various Polish social activists in the past several years, like Andrzej Poczobut, who's been behind bars since 2021. The partial reopening of border crossings would be the first softening of Poland's stance in months. For TVP World, I'm Kazimierz Słyszak.
Hungary and Russia are languishing in the bottom half of a major rule of law index that found sharp global declines in access to human rights and justice and a rise in authoritarianism. But as Paweł Trzaskowski reports, Poland appears to be bucking the trend, with Warsaw rebounding for the second year in a row.
This is it, the latest rule of law index by the World Justice Project. It measures human rights, access to justice, corruption and authoritarianism worldwide. In 2025, Poland moved up in the index for the second consecutive time, placing 32nd worldwide. However, not all the countries in the region are faring as well. For example, Hungary slipped 5 spots to 79th place, the biggest drop in the region.
When the rule of law is declining, it means automatically that the democracy is backsliding. When the democracy is not properly functioning, it means that civic spaces and freedom of individuals are shrinked.
Hungary's ally in the EU, Slovakia, is also down 2 spots in the ranking. Serbia, which has been rocked by anti-government protests for a year now, is also in a gradual decline. So is once EU hopeful Georgia, which slipped 2 spots since last year's general election, marred by irregularities and reported Russian interference. Georgia is placed 52nd overall, but ranks much lower when it comes to the constraints of government powers and civil justice.
Just 3 days ago, I was visiting one isolator where people are sent for protesting, and they were doctors, they were journalists, they were economists, they were other professionals who are just citizens and who are just dissatisfied what is happening in the country. And it's not only affecting 1 or 2 groups, it's not only affecting people who are politically active, it's affecting everyone.
The overall ranking is topped by Scandinavian countries, and the Baltic countries fare well too. On the other side of the index is Russia, which slumped to 119th, just above Nigeria and Mexico. Afghanistan and Venezuela close off the ranking. Overall, the report found an expansion of authoritarian trends with deep declines in constraints on government powers, open government and fundamental rights. Paweł Trzaskowski, TVP World.
Moving to the Czech Republic now, and likely Prime Minister-to-be Andrej Babiš has officially been shoulder-tapped to lead talks on forming a new government. Weeks have passed since voters went to the polls, with Babiš relying on the support of 2 far-right parties to gain a parliamentary majority. So what might his populist movement mean for the so-called Visegrad group, including Poland? And could it spell bad news for Ukraine? Our correspondent Andrew Sweeney reports from Prague.
Well, as people queue to visit the Czech Parliament on the anniversary of Czechoslovakian independence, one man who will hoping it will be as easy to enter government as its parliament is the prospective Prime Minister Andrej Babiš. Yesterday he met with President Petr Pavel and got the official green light to form a new government here. However, Babiš has said it will take until at least December to actually form that government. Certainly the scandal surrounding the Motoristi nominee for Foreign Minister Filip Turek refuses to go away. His social media posts have attracted considerable controversy in the Czech Republic. His remarks ranging from racist comments on Barack Obama and Meghan Markle to wearing Nazi paraphernalia. Now, comments by an advisor to the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban have raised some eyebrows, as it were, in that he has said that the election of Babiš shows a new bloc opposed to Ukraine can make its presence known in the Visegrad group, that being Poland, Slovakia, Hungary and Czechia.
In a way, Czech position might sacrifice its current program on support for Ukraine to a certain extent, at least in communication, in order to secure a domestic priority, which is the influence on the EU agenda through collaboration with other Central European partners and the leadership of Viktor Orban.
Babiš has aligned himself with 2 parties in particular that are very anti-Ukrainian, particularly the SPD. Now, what will likely change is that there will be a reduction in support for Ukrainian refugees in this country. And certainly, Babiš has said he will block Ukraine from joining the EU anytime soon. But the ammunition initiative, which has sent 1.5 million artillery shells from the Czech Republic to Ukraine, may well continue in a different form. Babiš has said he's against state support, but he may well support a private initiative to send supplies to Ukraine. It's important to remember that Babiš is not ideological in the sense Orban is. In his previous time as Prime Minister, Babiš actually governed with the support of the communists. He's very pragmatic, he's a billionaire businessman, and he wants, he's very similar to Trump, he wants to make a deal. So it may well be the case that while there will be decreased support, I should say, for Ukraine from the Czech Republic, it's unlikely to take on the sort of ideological bent that Prime Minister Orban's advisor has alluded to. For TVP World, Andrew Sweeney.
And that's all from me, Aaron Darman, here on World News Tonight. Coming up next is Alex Carrier's exclusive interview with Ihor Brusylo. But first, who is the Deputy Chief of Staff in the office of the Ukrainian President?
Ihor Brusylo is a Ukrainian politician and diplomat who served as Deputy Chief of Staff in the office of the Ukrainian President since 2021. He previously worked in several government and parliamentary positions, as well as the Ukrainian embassy in Italy. Recently, he assisted President Volodymyr Zelenskyy on his trip to Washington, D.C., where they met with US President Donald Trump.
Mr. Brusylo, welcome to TVP World.
Hello to you from Kiev. Thank you for having me.
Now, Russia's invasion of your country isn't going to end anytime soon, is it?
Unfortunately, the very near end is not in sight, and it's not on the Ukrainian side. President Zelenskyy reconfirmed it many times. He's ready for peace talks anytime, in any format. And, he is ready and available for the peace to be reestablished and be back to Ukraine.
Now, you've said there that President Zelenskyy and Ukraine are doing a lot for peace. Is there anything Ukraine isn't doing or could do more to bring this war to an end?
Ukraine is doing everything what it can and what it should. And it's on President Zelensky's shoulders to declare this intention to bring this war to the end. And that's what he is doing, actually, by traveling in Europe and going to the United States to rally this support behind Ukraine, behind himself, saying to Putin, sending this message across that, Ukraine is available to stop this war, and let's start with a ceasefire, the most feasible and most viable option as of now.
And you've been with President Zelenskyy on so many of those trips. You were in Washington with the president. The meeting with President Trump has been described as a shouting match where President Trump swore and called Russia's invasion a special operation. What are you advising to President Zelenskyy to do next with the US leader?
Well, actually, the dialogue is on, it's active, and there is a good rapport between President Zelenskyy and President Trump. No matter what you can hear on write or read from the mass media, the situation is a little bit different, because when you gather and when you start talking, this is a frank talk. It's a frank conversation, and you exchange your views on the position, how it stands. You deliver your messages about the real state of affairs, and the other side is trying to argue about that and trying to get more information. And when they get this more information, they sort of understand this better. So this is a practical dialogue, and there is no need to say that it should be mush and mellow relationship. Not at all. But this dialogue is active and meaningful, and I cannot agree that this meeting was a shouting rout.
So you were there. How would you describe that meeting? How would you describe the interaction between President Zelenskyy and President Trump in Washington?
Well, the fact is that President Trump had this phone conversation with President Putin before the meeting with President Zelenskyy. It did not contribute, of course, to the success of the meeting from the very scratch, from the very beginning. But in any case, that was a good starting position also for President Zelenskyy to deliver his message, because the situation is fluid, it's changing in Ukraine and on the battlefield. And the truth is that there are no special gains that Russia is declaring they have on the battlefield. And that was an exchange of practical facts about what Ukraine needs to make more progress and to be more successful, not only on the battlefield, so at the table of negotiations.
There was a perception, though, that that phone call with Vladimir Putin really changed President Trump's position, or at least his perspective. Is it not frustrating for you and for Ukrainian diplomats that one single phone call from Putin can undo months of your work?
Well, this is a ploy and gimmicks that he is used to use in dealing with leaders in the world, and many of them are well aware of that. And every time he seems to be losing the situation, he employs these gimmicks to show that he is back in the game. Sometimes he is successful, sometimes he is not. And that was the point, that he thought he would be successful, but the case turned to be different. Yes, that was not an easy conversation, but that conversation was absolutely meaningful. And when the parties departed, I mean the President Trump and President Zelensky, everyone understood that their each positions was heard enough to understand what the next development will be.
Now, I was reporting in Kiev, where you are now, when this phone call happened. One of the outcomes, of course, was a potential meeting between President Trump and Vladimir Putin in Budapest. That now seems to be off the cards. Do you think President Trump is being played by Vladimir Putin?
Well, it's in the opinion of Vladimir Putin that he is playing with President Trump, but the truth is opposite. And it's a good thing that this meeting never happened, and it should never happen in Europe.
So you think President Trump should never meet with Vladimir Putin in Europe in the current state of negotiations?
That's right. I believe that would be a disrespect for Europe, and it will not give advantage to President Trump.
Well, let's speak about Europe, your European partners. One thing, although US support may be changing, President Trump's position will describe it as fluid. One thing you could rely on, you have relied on since the start of the full-scale invasion, was European support. We've seen reporting in the last few hours of a coalition of the unwilling, with Hungary, the Czech Republic under new leadership, Slovakia, led, of course, by Viktor Orban. If the US is unreliable and Europe is only going to become more gridlocked because of this coalition, who can help Ukraine?
Well, everyone can help Ukraine, including Czech Republic, Slovakia, and including Hungary, no matter how strange it may seem now. But Europe should be united, and there is no need to disunite or to say that somebody is against all others. That's not a good game to play. Well, and I cannot say that President Trump does not have this influence over Hungary, and Viktor Orban will be in the White House on November 8th. They will have this conversation, and I believe that President Trump will use his arguments to talk to Viktor Orban and to see that there is unity in Europe. Nobody needs Europe disunited in this case, and no less Ukraine needs Europe to be disunited.
Would you encourage President Trump to tell Viktor Orban to stop buying fossil fuels from Russia altogether?
Well, it's in the interest of all Europe, and everyone will have their reasons to place and try to defend its position. But that's what Europe is doing now. It's a united decision, and if this decision is a unanimity, then it should be stuck by everyone in the European Union.
One change in US position, of course, is that financial support has dried up. Of course, they were selling weapons where perhaps they would have been given in the past. We've discussed European support maybe wavering a little bit. The European Union not known for being particularly quick in its processes, of course, of frustration I'm sure you have. Is there a risk, frankly speaking, of Ukraine running out of money?
Well, that's the common state of affairs. This is the common game. We need to finish it together. Ukraine now is not alone, and I hope that this will not be the case the next year if the war continues. So Ukraine is at the forefront, and it contains the danger of this war spreading over to Europe. And the Euro-Atlantic space should be united. There should be a strong and final response to stop this war. And we rely on our European partners, on ourselves, and on the United States of America to make this war end.
There's also 140 billion euros worth of Russian frozen assets sitting in Belgium right now, which could be loaned to Ukraine. The European Commission wants that to happen. Other European countries want that to happen. Belgian Prime Minister saying no. What's your message to Prime Minister De Wever?
I think this is more like a financial engineering. There is a good option for this money to be used by the European Commission as a non-contingent loan. And this money can be used as a collateral as a compensation of the Russian Federation after the war ends. If this money is not paid back by Russia, then they remain frozen and they will continue to generate profits. So this is no losing game. And everyone wants to have this legal certainty that they will not be left alone. And I believe this will be the task for the European Union to convince that Europe stands united. That was the alliance that was meant to be a single one. And no one should be afraid that the one or another country will be left alone.
So Prime Minister De Wever, the Belgian Prime Minister, is wrong to block this new scheme?
Well, he is not wrong. It's the process. It's not over yet. He wants to make his position clear, and all other European leaders are heeding to his position, and they're trying to make sure that this response will be a united one when the time comes, for example, that Russia may present its claims that they want this court case to be started, when it is about money. No, this should be ensured by everyone, and it should be safe. And I believe it's about more justice than anything else.
We last spoke a couple months ago. I was in Kiev. You welcomed me to your offices. We also discussed Polish-Ukrainian relations. Would you say they're better now than they were a couple months ago?
We are destined to have good relations. We are close neighbors. We are next door countries. And we are grateful to the Polish people from the very beginning, what they have done for Ukraine and continue to do. We will remember this forever, for generations to come. And this relation should be based on a mutually respectful attitude to our history, to our culture, to our countries, and we are open in our relations with the Polish people and the Polish government and the Polish president, and we would like to have the same attitude from them. And I believe, my personal conviction is that the level of our relations is the best.
Well, you said to me a couple months ago that you would like Polish President Nawrocki to visit Kiev. The sooner the better, you said at the time. His top advisor now says that if President Zelenskyy wants to meet Mr. Nawrocki, he should come to Warsaw. Is President Zelenskyy willing to make that first move and come here to Warsaw?
Well, we agreed to exchange these visits, and when President Zelenskyy and President Nawrocki had their first phone conversation, they just agreed that President Nawrocki will visit Kiev. That was just, an agreement between them, and we are open with all our welcome President Nawrocki to Kiev. I think this will be a good advantage also for him to visit Kiev, and he is always a welcome guest, and welcome to Kiev, Mr. President.
But if the requirement from Mr. Nawrocki is for President Zelenskyy to make that first move and come to Warsaw first, would he be willing to do that?
I think then they have called each other once again and to talk whether they will have to change their previous agreement, the first agreement they have made on the phone call.
Mr. Brusylo, I'd like to end on a perhaps difficult question, but one I ask many of our experts when we speak about Ukraine. It's a simple question. When do you estimate this war in your country may end?
Well, it depends only on one person in one country, in one building, about when he is ready to do that. On our side, we are ready to do it immediately.
Ihor Brusylo, Deputy Head of the Presidential Office in Ukraine and advisor to President Zelenskyy, thank you so much for speaking to TVP World.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you all for watching. I've been Alex Cadier. Take care and stay safe.